What an incredible opportunity this was. We got to talk about all the things I wanted to talk about, including how he brings out so much character in his voice, how he found his voice in the beginning, both his musical and his non-musical influences, how he overcomes fear, Ren's different approaches to writing, say, Sick Boy versus his upcoming album, and practicing non-judgment and abandonment as you share creative expressions with others. So happy to get to talk with you. I've been looking forward to this since I saw one of your comments on one of my old videos.
Yeah, mate. I used to watch your videos all the time. I love particularly the ones that were like quite Jeff Buckley focused, because I'm a massive Jeff Buckley fan. So I actually watched your stuff like years prior to I saw you doing a reaction for me. So it was one of those full circle moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I really like what you're doing, man. Really, really like it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I wanted to actually start by talking about Jeff Buckley a little bit, because I hear so much of of Buckley's influence in what you do, particularly in the big push stuff and stuff like that. So talk about him as an influence, and then other of your vocal influences that you've had growing up.
Yeah, I mean, for Jeff, what I loved is really just the freedom of expression.
Yeah.
There's so much. It's unchained, you know. It's why I love Hendrix as a guitarist. I kind of liken Jeff's singing style to Hendrix's guitar playing. It's just so free and liberated, and it can really go anywhere. And there's so many of these unusual, unorthodox intervals and stuff that he uses. And the freedom, it just kind of feels like raw expression. And at times it's imperfect, and there's so much beauty in it, that imperfection.
Right.
Yeah, for me, my favorite Jeff Buckley stuff is when you watch him live and he just kind
Absolutely.
And it's never the same.
Right.
No performance is the same. And I really try and take that to my own live performances, so that if you go to a live show, you're never going to hit, if you go 2 nights in a row, for example, you won't hear the song played in the same way. And I love that, because it's kind of really expressing what's there in the moment to be expressed. And and I'm a real firm believer in that, because I think it just really connects you to that moment, because you can be feeling totally different from one day to the next, and to tap into what that feeling in that day is, I think that's one of the reasons I absolutely love Jeff Buckley. I just think he was a generational talent, man.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. You're right. You can tell, particularly in the live stuff, and it's been amazing to have so much of that released over the years. Right? There are these, things that would have normally been bootleg recordings or whatever released. You can listen to them on Spotify. But the one thing that really strikes me in the live stuff is his level of abandonment. He does not care. He is fully in the moment, experiencing his own disposition, his own voice, like every emotion that he's feeling, and it's just dumping out of him. And that's one thing that I've noticed and why I enjoy your live one takes so much. You can tell that you are well beyond, you've done the work in the studio, going line by line, crafting the perfect take and introspecting on how you want something to sound or come across, and then that is sort of put over in the corner, and you're living in the moment with your one takes, having the influence of all that work you've done in the studio. That's what makes your one take so great.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's that in the studio they're kind of refined and perfected to perfection. Because I'm such a perfectionist in the studio, it takes me forever. I'm not one of these like I'm not like a Jay-Z who gets in and does it in 3 takes and gets out. I really try and meticulously craft it, and I think that really helps, because then when I go to it's so I've got a foundation. There's a solid foundation there, but the live takes usually are very different to the studio takes, and for me personally, I'm usually happier with it's funny because I'm so meticulous in the studio, but when I do the live takes, I'm almost more happy with the takes there because of the imperfect little moments. And when I'm doing the live takes, say if I'm choosing between 10, I say if I do it 10 times, there's always difference. And sometimes it's quite difficult being like, oh, I like that bit, but I like this bit. And so you have to look at a whole piece and choose the one take that was like, kind of captures something or just that special magic place. So, I think they both serve their place, like the studio and the live. So they both serve their purpose, and I just love making music, man.
So talk about the studio fine-tooth comb vocal approach. That's one thing that I've not only have I coached a lot of people on, but seen other vocalists do this, where they're in the studio and they're going over and over 3 words because the mouth shape has to be just right, the inflection, the emotion, the amount of grit you're using, whatever. All of that has to be just perfect, and you do it hundreds and hundreds of times if you need to, and then it just somehow works live. But talk about that studio process and your patience and non-judgment that you use while you're doing that in the studio. Yeah,
well, for me, it's really just, it's more of a feeling that I like, because sometimes I'll choose a take that may not necessarily be like the perfect in terms of like timing and pitch, but it's really like, for me, I'll choose something that best conveys the feeling of what I'm trying to get across lyrically, sentimentally, everything. So yeah, it's really about that. And you're totally right. Sometimes it can be one line, and that I like really just dig into that one line until it captures that feeling. Because sometimes you just, and it's almost unexplainable in words, the process of choosing that. It's just really a feeling. It comes down to a feeling like, okay, that feels right now. We can move on. So,
yeah. But that takes a lot of non-judgment, right? You're not saying something is good or bad, or my voice sucks right now, or what I'm writing sucks right now. There's not that self-talk going on. It's more of this diving in and finding the good in what you're doing.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I just know a lot of students have a wall go up in that when they're making a recording or listening back to themselves in a performance, they're comparing themselves to someone that they love, and they get trapped in the judgment of how they sound, and get lost in they won't be able to improve on that sound because they're stuck in judgment. How have you overcome that throughout I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, but there had to have been a point where you were like, oh, yeah, I'm not really good at this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And in the doing, you get good.
Yeah, and for me, I'll be honest, there are certain times where it's just not there. And I think with time, I've become good at spotting that. So like, if I get into the studio and I record 5 takes and none of them are quite it, usually what I'll do is I've learned to be like, I'm just going to put this down today and I'm going to come and do it tomorrow. Because for me, it's such an energy thing more than a technical thing. I mean, sometimes you can push through and you can get it. So like, there have been times like that, but more times than not, it's really like in the energy space. Because if I'm in a really flow state and I'm in a really good energy space, it just comes out, and then I'm listening back to the takes and I'm happy with all of them. And it's kind of like this. There's nothing that I can really do other than obviously looking after myself, resting well. But there's not a huge amount I can do to really dictate it. It's almost like it's like a channeling almost to get slightly spiritual with it. And sometimes you're kind of cut off from that source for whatever reason. And sometimes you can be feeling great and still cut off from that source, but sometimes it's just there. And I think the more that you do it, the easier it is to find and tap into that source and then just be in it and just be in that space. So it's kind of like a muscle in a way. I don't know if you look much into like, there's a guy who teaches flow state, and it's not even music, it's just a separate thing. There's this whole science on flow state, which is this space that you can get into where you become thoughtless. It's almost quite Buddhist in a way.
Yeah.
It's like you take away the thinking mind so you can just be and just do. And there are lots of things that you can do to try and engineer that rather than just hope for the best and hope it's there. And there are loads of things that can put you into that space, like dancing, like hanging out with really good friends. Like I was listening to an interview with Rick Rubin where he actually believed that getting people into a happy space just by taking them out for a meal, it can be anything different for every single person. It puts them in that really good flow state space. And then when you get into the studio and expressing yourself, because I think the biggest enemy is the thought, is that what you say, it's the critical thought in your brain. I think that can be a big block, because the second you start thinking, oh, is my intonation right? Are my notes right? Sure, those are important. And if you put the groundwork in beforehand, you've got a really solid foundation. But if those are right there in the way when you're actually in the studio, you're not really going to be focusing on the message. And that's, for me, that's
right.
the most important thing, or the feeling. It is really primary for me, the most important thing when I'm in a studio space.
Yeah. In the first video that I reacted to, which is High Ren, wasn't the first video I saw of you, but it was the first video I put on there. You just struck me with the way you were bouncing back and forth between these characters. Obviously, the storyline dictated that, but your voice was the one that was leading the viewer and listener through those contrasts. And that's something that is so hard for people to do when they are thinking about being right or good, right? If you are communicating, and you are a vessel for communication and emoting and sharing that experience, bouncing back and forth between different characters as a vocalist will come as a result of being in that moment, like you're talking about. It's not something you have to try to do.
It's almost like, because on the surface, if I was to be analytical in that moment, the voice that I'm pulling on is quite silly. If you kind of look back at it, for the evil Ren, the voice is almost quite silly and comical. And if I start thinking that in the moment, then it almost comes across even more that way, and I start doubting it. So yeah, it really is just about trying to embody. And I've done this with my work with like Jenny, the Taylor, Jenny, and Screech. When you sort of embodying Screech's character, it's like, it's really just about. It's almost like acting in a way. It's like you've got to tap into the feelings of that character and forget that you're you character. Because if I was that character and that was my voice, I'm not going to be thinking, because it's been my voice my whole life, I'm not going to be thinking, oh, this sounds silly. It's just the way that I am.
Yeah.
The same with Screech, like being this aggressive sort of anti-hero character. So it's like, it really just is about embodying the character. I think what really helped with that is years of busking, covering other people's stuff, because, you know, like, I've covered stuff from like Frank Sinatra to Sting to Bob Marley. Really, I obviously try and bring a lot of myself to those performances, but I also try and bring a lot of them to those performances as well. And it's like, I think years and years of doing that has allowed me to get good at almost like, it's not mimicking, because I'm still putting myself into it, but it's a way, in a way, you're slightly having to tap into what makes their vocal inflection so good.
Yeah.
And that's really helped, I think, with like when I'm inventing characters, just putting a totally new thing that almost doesn't sound like myself onto those characters, you know?
Right. Well, talk a little bit more about some of your other vocal inspirations, like Bob Marley, Sting.
Sting is a huge one. I love his, because I think mine and Sting's vocal range are quite similar when we're going up into that higher octave.
Yeah.
And that was just naturally how for my range, you know, we will have difference in genetics and stuff. And that was singing Sting stuff for me, in early Belief stuff particularly, which just felt really good for me in my range, which is why I took a lot of inspiration from Sting. And I think his choice of melody kind of leaked into my choice of melody, because I listened to them so much growing up. I really love it. It's slightly more unusual. And then I really love, in terms of inspirations for me, I mean, I really love stuff like System of a Down, Faith No More, Incubus, because of their such unusual choices of intervals. It's almost Middle Eastern at points. Jack Buckley did the same thing as well. I find it really nice breaking out of that simple pentatonic thing and playing with like tritone, like little tiny semitones or things between semitones. I just think that's why I love Middle Eastern music. They do it so beautifully, and I think it's such an incredible skill to be able to only like those microtonal bends and stuff. I love it. I absolutely love it. So I take a lot of inspiration from people like that as well.
Do you have a background in musical theater?
No. I think it's just like stories. I love stories, and I grew up with two quite sort of like hippie parents who used to take me to a lot of festivals where there'd be like such a rich, like the much smaller festivals in the UK that you wouldn't see, you know, very independent little ones. And a lot of the heart of those things is like folk music. It's about stories. It's about old tradition. I grew up in Wales, and those old like Celtic folklore and stories.
Yeah.
I had a lot of that growing up. So I think it inevitably just leaked into my work because I just love the art of storytelling. I love story arcs of characters and stuff like that. And I also I'd say one of my biggest influences for my writing is more film than music for my actual lyrics. So like, you know, Stanley Kubrick, Martin McDonagh, who did like Seven Psychopaths, and Tarantino and people like that. I love it. For me, that's like modern Shakespeare. It's like the modern tragedies, because those stories, the story is calamity. They don't usually have happy endings. Right. And a lot of my work doesn't usually have happy endings, but I think there's a lot of poetry and beauty within those stories. They're the sorts of films I loved growing up. So I try and take a lot of inspiration to that and put that into my writing.
Well, so Money Game Part 3, by the way, the activities of the last week have just been so incredibly fun to follow. So thank you. Thank you for putting all that stuff out. I watched the treasure hunt, and then I watched that, and then immediately went to watching Money Game Part 3. And so I was all broken up by that back video, like the creation video that you did at the end, going directly from there into Money Game Part 3. And man, just a wonderful experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
But we get to the end of Money Game Part 3, which, again, that video, incredible character bouncing back and forth, right? Sitting down in the wheelchair, and you're Jimmy, and then you're up and you're narrating, and then you're holding the gun, and you're sometimes Jimmy and sometimes the narrator, and it's just amazing. At the very end, I had some discussions with people in my comments after my reaction, because there were some people that were like, no, death is not the answer. And it's like, no, but he didn't kill himself. The gun didn't go off. And then just thinking about, like, no, the gun didn't go off, but I think the gun, to me, symbolized he's not killing himself, but he's got to purge or kill that part of himself, the greed, the need to achieve. And putting that together with what you did in Masochist, to me was just, it was a huge, like it was a big moment for me, because it was putting those two things together. No, committing suicide's not the answer, but purging these things that keeps us from finding our true expression, finding our joy. Those are the things we need to kill.
Yeah.
And thinking about that in terms of creating art, and how we're talking about non-judgment and putting the character and the self-expression first, we have to get rid of the need to achieve, the need to be good, the need to impress people, the need to have accolades, so that our genuine true self-expression is able to be realized.
Yeah. I think that's so important. It's something that I notice about. There's this thing that happens, I think, with a lot of bands where they'll make an incredible first album, and then the later work isn't quite as incredible. There's loads of exceptions to this rule, and the exceptions to the rule usually end up turning out to be my favorite artist. And I think one of the things that is partially responsible for that is, like you say, you get so much success, and then that success almost it taints why you wrote those first songs for that first album that made it so successful, because you have so much of the thinking mind in the way, because you're like, I need to follow this up and be successful. And for me, it's so important to try and remove myself from the glitz and glamour and from all of that, so that the artistic expression always becomes removed from the intent of what it to do. Because if I sit down and write a song with the intent of this has to be a number one record, that's not an expression of me. That's an expression of me wanting something.
Yes.
And that's going to leak into what I do. So it always has to be very important for me that I remove any purpose of it. Sure, when it's done, I can think, oh, this might help someone going through this, or this might, this is a really catchy hook, so it's probably going to be successful. But I don't want that to leak into my sphere of thought while I'm creating it, because otherwise I think it taints it. It spoils the artistic expression for me personally. For some people, it might work. But and I just wanted to touch on quickly the last scene at the end of Money Game where you hear the click.
Yeah.
it was a really important thing for me to do, because what I wanted to do there, I don't really want to explain what my intent was behind that, because I think the beautiful thing is, it's like at the end of a movie when it ends on a thing, there's not going to be a sequel and there's still this big cliffhanger and you're like, what happened? I need to know what happened. I love those moments because it lets the viewer finish the story.
Yes.
And that's what I want to do with Money Game. I want people to watch it, and I want them to, like yourself, you had a beautiful interpretation of it. It's really beautiful. And I think other people will maybe think, oh, he died and that was the interpretation. All of them can be correct.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of art. It can all be subjective and people can take from it what they want. Some people might go, I hate this song because it's got a message that suicide is the answer. And that's totally valid for them as well. If that's what they took from it, they took that from it because of their own life experiences that led to them thinking in that way. So it's all valid, man. And the most thing that I was proud of about that song, I don't know if you picked up on this, but some people picked up on it. The very last scene is essentially the chorus for the first two Money Games. So, rain, 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 a storm, it comes our way. Lies, a poison in the veins. The finger on the trigger of the Money Game. So what I loved is I didn't actually ever sing the chorus in Money Game 3 consciously, because what I did is I performed the chorus.
Yeah.
So you have the image of him sitting in the rain. He's become tainted. It's the poison in the veins. His journey has poisoned his life experience, and finger on the trigger of the Money Game. In Money Game 3, it's very literal. He literally has his finger on the trigger of this gun, which was his resort, to his empire crumbling, to him realizing that money had got in the way of his morals. So it was really nice for me to be able to sing the chorus without singing it.
Well, the first thing I pointed out in my analysis of it was the mirror, and it was just so convicting. It's like this huge test of, because I think, even if you're not in a position where you did write software and make millions and then go deal arms or whatever, we all have these victories that keep us, well, we should be satisfied. No, we want more. Oh, we should be satisfied now. No, we want more. And the fact that you started out by pulling off your hood and looking in the mirror, it was just such a wonderful way to go into it, because I got from the very, very beginning, this is about me.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's about acknowledging our hypocrisy, because we'll all have a virtue. We'll all have our different virtue that we think is right and that we think is virtuous and that we preach. And I think humans have a good way of preaching it as if their shit don't stink.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm preaching greed, and it's almost impossible for me to preach a message of anti-greed without realizing and acknowledging my own hypocrisy within that, because it's so deeply ingrained within the system that we've created that, I'm here contending for a #1 album this week. Right. I really want it. Yeah. I'm not going to lie to you. And why do I want it? Because at the end of the day, I'm just going to be reduced to dust, and it's not really going to matter in the grand scheme of things. Spiritually, it's not really going to fulfill me. It's really an ego thing. Yeah. And these things that we want, I think it's really difficult to truly, separate ourselves from this desire to want more. I think it's inherently part of our biology, So it's really about, for me, the message was, it's acknowledging our own hypocrisy within the messages that we preach, but still being like, you know what, you can be a hypocrite and still preach this. You can still push for better whilst acknowledging that you are still complicit in a system that's destructive and that's perhaps causing suffering for other people. Because I think when we when we push that back and think that we're just, we think that we are doing everything perfect, I think it's a lot easier to trip up in those instances,
Yeah.
Because I can't point blame at somebody and say, you are evil for doing this and I am good because I'm standing for this, without acknowledging that they're a human being and they just, certain circumstances led them to doing what they did, and everyone has the propensity to change. Everyone has the ability to aim for a better life, which I try to do the best way I can, but I know that I'm going to make mistakes on the way.
Yeah. what you said about you have a number one album potentially, and why do you want it? And you're acknowledging that you want it. It's this battle between, the pursuit of the goal, the achievement, and all of those things. You are experiencing this on a very different scale than most people do, but what you're talking about right there has the potential to bury your artistic, self-expressive self, right?
Yeah.
Because it starts becoming about what you want instead of who you are.
Exactly. It's a beautiful way of putting it. And yeah, so that's the danger. So it's really about, I think the thing that keeps me the most grounded, like in all honesty, I'm sitting in a clinic 5 days a week with an IV in my arm. I said it yesterday as I was in clinic talking to somebody who was like, how are you going to stay grounded with all of this? And I just pointed to the IV and I said that. I mean, and it's so true. It's like, I think there's something about being eternally faced with your own mortality.
Yeah.
And being aware, like this thing that I have, it's not the flu, man. It's something that could really at any moment turn really bad. And so I think being constantly aware of the imprint that we're leaving in our lives on the world is a really good thing, because it's allowed me to, and a lot of people have been like, how have you come out of this being so positive when life has been so cruel to you? And it's like, well, it's just about being aware of my mortality, because I'm aware that my time here, as a young person, I was forced to be aware that my time here is short. I didn't even know if I would live to see the age of 30. So, with that short time, I really want to do everything that I can to leave a positive imprint, not so that I'm remembered. It's not really about me, because I'm dead once I'm gone. It doesn't matter how many accolades and how many things are in my future that could be to do with awards or number one spots. Really, it's really about, when I'm gone, is the imprint that I leave on this world a positive one, or is it more negative? And I really hope for it to be a positive one. So I try and do everything in my power, artistically, even talking, that helps push towards that goal, because I really believe in humans as a really, an incredibly beautiful species, and with incredibly amazing amount of potential, because and we want, like I was saying at the end of the Eden video, we're one of the only creatures, supposedly, depending on how you view this from a philosophical point, supposedly with free will. So we have the choice. I think that I have free will, but maybe I would think that. I don't really know. The philosophy, when you start looking into these things, it's such a big web of things.
Mind-blowing.
That we can deep dive you into existentialism, but I would hope that I have free will. And if I do have free will, then I'm always going to try and choose the better path for my fellow people, because I believe that I'm a part of a whole. I don't believe that I, Ren, am one person as a whole. I believe I am just a small cell in a huge part of the whole, which is humankind, which is beyond humankind, which is all the matter that makes up everything that we are. So I really I'm trying my best to try and be a positive part of that whole.
Well, at the end of our lives, do we want to be remembered by what we wanted out of life or what we gave? Right? I mean, anybody who's remembered for anything, whether good or bad, really, is remembered based on what they gave.
It's like John Lennon. He's probably most, for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, he's mostly remembered for being somebody who imagined. Do you know what I mean? And that was one of the most beautiful. That was one of the most beautiful things about John Lennon for me, and one of the most tragic things about his death is that he was. That's the thing that I think of when I think of John. I think of his song Imagine, and I think of that image of a better world.
Yeah.
And more so than his. I mean, he's a phenomenal songwriter, phenomenal musician, right? But the thing that I really remember the most and value the most was his vision of a future.
I want to talk a little bit about songwriting, and back to some of the voice stuff with some of the time we have left. Your stuff for Sick Boy versus the next album, and they're going to be vastly different. What's your difference in in writing session approach when you've got a guitar in hand or you've got Logic and a laptop and you're making beats?
Yeah. It's totally different, actually. And that's why I'm really looking forward to the next album, because the next album, I'm going totally left field with this album. There's not actually going to be any rapping on the next album. So it's...
Wait, none? There's not going to be any?
I mean, there could be some spoken word stuff, but for me, I really wanted to challenge myself to make a record influenced by people like The Police, like Jeff, like early Britpop stuff like Blur and Oasis, Seas and stuff like that. So I really wanted to make a record like that because... for this hip hop album, I conscious, and I always had this idea before I made Sick Boy that I wanted to almost do like a yin and yang, like a dark and the light, and Sick Boy is the dark, and that was always my intent, and I'm sticking to it. So you have a hip hop record, and for the hip hop fans, for people who love that, even people who don't like hip hop might, can get on board with this album. But the second one is going to be totally different, and I like the challenge of that because I'm going to be in a very different writing headspace, and it really does influence and infer the lyrics when the music is so different. And I really like, because with hip hop, there's so many words you can condense into a small amount of time. That's what I love about it. There's so many things you can say. There's so many double entendres you can play with. With more traditional songwriting, there's a lot less of that. So there's a lot more intent that has to go into each line, for me at least. Yeah. So I really like that challenge. So I'm really looking forward to putting together an album that challenges me to almost cremate REN now, reinvent myself. David Bowie did this really well. Reinvent myself and put out a completely different sound. And you know what? Some people who are heavily into the hip hop stuff might not vibe with it as much, but that's totally fine. Because it's, again, for me, it's not really about, I'm going to do this because it's going to be successful. It's really about, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to express now.
Yes.
And it also echoes where I'm at in my life, because I'm further along in treatment. I'm feeling better in myself. I'm feeling happier in myself than when I wrote Sick Boy. So for me to go, oh, Sick Boy was successful, I'm going to carry on talking about my illness. I'm going to carry on talking about these more dark subjects because that's a formula for success, because I got potentially a #1 record with it. For me, it's not about that. It's really about me being like, okay, I'm in a more positive space. Let's make more positive music. Let the expression be about rebirth. Let the expression be about the fact that in Sick Boy, I didn't really see much of a bright future. Right now, the future's looking more bright. So let's make my expression about that,
So do you, when you're writing more traditional stuff, you sit on a couch with an acoustic guitar and noodle around till you come up with some hooks versus making a beat and then coming up with rhythms? Is that kind of the contrast there?
Yeah, and I don't really write on my phone. I like to actually write with a pen and paper. It just feels I just like it a lot more. So yeah, man, I prefer to take notes like that. It's a nightmare because then when it comes to writing my lyrics down, I have to sit there and actually type them all out again.
Right.
But that's the way I like to write. So yeah, you're totally bang on with the hip hop stuff. What I usually do is I'll sit down, I'll come up with a beat, I'll program a beat, or I'll program a synth or something, just like a foundation, and I do it bit by bit. Whereas with a song that I take to the studio, it'll usually start with either a piano or a guitar, and I'll just sit there playing, and I'll usually just write it in however many sittings it takes. Sometimes it'll flow out in one, sometimes it'll take weeks, and I'll just be tweaking bits and bobs. But that's what I'll normally do. I'll write a foundation of a song so I know it works on acoustic guitar. I had some advice when I was a lot younger that was like, if you can write a song and it works on acoustic guitar, it's a good song.
Yes.
Because if you bury it in production to have to make it work,
right,
then you're kind of, it's all the other bits, the bells and whistles that are making. I'm not saying that that's the wrong approach, because some people have got an incredible production that makes maybe quite a song devoid of too much feeling, still really good because the production's got so much value in it. So I'm not saying that's the wrong approach, but for me, I really like to write it so that if I'm just there with a guitar and it really works, then I'm like, okay, I'm onto a winner here. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so many songs on Sick Boy that work like that, right? That's why you were able to do Murder Acoustic and stuff like that, right? Or For Joe.
Yeah.
There's
some songs that shouldn't have really worked, like Animal Flow, that somehow
they worked. Yeah. Well, and I was going to mention that at the end of Animal Flow, where you were doing you did the whole thing on the bus and then messed up at the very end. And then I wanted to know, how many takes did you do after that to try to grasp the energy of the one you ended up keeping? Or were you just done after that?
Well, we got kicked off the bus, so we only had a short window of opportunity to get that because we had the bus driver kick us off the bus. So I think we did about 2 takes after that, but there was some when I watched that take back, even though it cuts off the last chorus and Sam falls over because the bus takes like a turning. I watched it back and I was like, I don't know, there was something about it, and there was something quite good about him falling over because it was like, well, it's just fucking real. You can't plan that.
Right.
I mean, lucky he didn't fall over right in the second verse, but yeah, I don't know. There was just something really raw about that take that I loved, so we ended up going with that one then.
Okay, so rewind quite a bit. Right before you started being an artist, and you wanted to be a vocalist, a writer, performer. The fear, the trepidation, the stage of life you were in there. How did you overcome the no voices when you were just beginning to be an artist?
It's funny. So when I first started writing music, all the lyrics that I wrote were like, it was almost like me making fun. So it was like my first songs were like me taking the piss out of my mates. So I used to like write songs. I had this one song that I wrote about my friend Chris when I was like 14. My mate Steve's older brother Chris used to go in and get his alcohol from the shops because he was 18. So he would go and get his, and he would we'd be drinking out on the streets, little despicable youths, and he was like, he would drink a little bit and he'd get so drunk. So I wrote a song basically making fun of the fact that we, like, us little teenagers could drink more than them. That was one of the first songs that I wrote. But like, so a lot of these first songs, and there was one song called Streetlights, which made it onto my first album, Freckled Angels. A lot of the first songs that I wrote were like comedy. And in that comedy, I felt, because I knew the songs weren't taking themselves seriously.
You weren't taking yourself, yeah.
If someone was like, oh, that's a crap song, I'll be like, yeah, I know it's a crap song. It was always meant to be a crap song. So I think that gave me a confidence. And within the comedy of it, I was able to grow my songwriting ability, and I was able to kind of then move to a place where I could start writing about more serious topics. But because I've been doing it for so long, I was like more adept in it. So I think that really helped. And I also think just busking on the streets really helped, because it's a space where there's not just people transfixed on you. People can either stop to watch you or they just walk past, right? So it's a safe space to be able to really test things out and try and, because if people don't like it, they just don't acknowledge you. So there's less like, if I'm at a concert and there's 100, 200 people watching me and I feel like they're not vibing with it, I'm really going to feel that. It's going to be a real thing. So busking was a real good space for me to grow, I think, in my performance and my testing out new songs and stuff.
And is that the same for your voice when you first started? Because you've got such a wonderfully diverse, you're rapping to Rage in the middle of Bob Marley and doing all sorts of different things with your voice. And what allowed you to go from just a regular person to being able to do those things with your voice? What got you your start with particularly your singing voice?
I mean, my singing voice was rubbish when I first started, and I'm not saying that to try and be humble. It genuinely was. When I listened back to old, it's really husky and low and really pitchy, and that was my teenage voice. It just, I'll try and dig out some recordings at some point, but it really wasn't that good. So it was just a lot of persistence, and it was really busking, because there was a point where, I only ever had one job when I was younger, which was at the co-op, and I got fired from that job because I'd come in hungover and stuff like that. And so I decided to go busking to make, because I was so obsessed with music. All I wanted to do, I remember while I was in those jobs, just hating them, because I was like, I just want to get home and produce music. And anything that was taking time away from, even in school, like at dinner time, I would just lock myself in the music room and play piano. So I was just always like hyper fixated on music. So when I was like, I'm going to busk to make money. And when I started, again, I had people, and this isn't a joke, I had some people would walk past me and go, "You're rubbish, mate," and just shout out. I was pretty rubbish at the time, but I was just so persistent that music is all I wanted to do to make my living, because it's all I wanted to focus on. So it really was just obsession and just persistence and trying not to make those criticisms, whether internal or external, something that stops me, because it really is just about time and how much time and passion we put into these things, I think.
So you had to be willing to suck and expect that you would suck and just do it anyway. Like,
just do it anyway. If you love it and you see somebody else doing it and be like, I want to do that, but I suck, so I don't think I will. Everyone sucks when they start. That's the thing. Nobody just picks up a guitar and starts strumming chords and starts singing with the voice of an angel. You know, there are some people who naturally have a good singing voice and have like a natural ability. With that, some of my friends who've never done singing training or anything like that can sing well. But I think I was never one of those people. I was always, even to this day, if I'm not doing my singing warm-ups for like 2 weeks in a row, my singing voice kind of sucks at the end of that 2 weeks when I come back to it. And I know that there's going to be a clunky phase where I have to do a week's worth of warm-ups and stuff, and then my voice will get into that good place again. Yeah. I'm not someone blessed with like this natural ability to just fall right back into the pocket. So that's what my advice would be to anyone watching who's like feels like they're not good enough. It's just like, it really is just about putting in the time. If you're in that place, and because that graft will pay off eventually. I mean, people are like, oh, this new artist on the scene, REN. I've been doing this since I was 12 years old.
Yeah,
like, you know.
Right. So do you have any formal voice training? Did you ever take any voice lessons?
Oh, I was always, which is funny because my mum is a singing teacher, but I never got voice lessons from. I think I had lessons when I was younger, but it's because it's like this parent-kid relationship.
Yeah.
Right? I was just like, oh, you know, you can get frustrated because they're your parents. So I never actually had singing lessons with my mum. So I actually taught myself from people like yourself. I used to watch loads of YouTube videos. Because I used to busk and lose my voice a lot, and now I don't because
good.
Just watching so many technique videos to try and get to a place where I can still have that grit, but not in a way that damages my voice at the end of the day.
Right.
So that's, you know, it's big thanks to people like yourself, man, because it's the same with guitar and voice. I've learned totally off YouTube. It's an amazing resource.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much for taking the time in the massively busy release week. I pre-ordered the vinyl.
Oh yeah!
And
I hope you enjoy it. Which one did you get? I've got them here.
I got the most expensive one.
Did you get this one? This is the limited edition.
Yeah, it would have been that one. Yep.
So Brigitte, my friend, she designed all these. I want to show the inside, man. You don't see this on the website. It's all the lyrics to. It's the lyrics to Money Game 3.
Cool.
And then you've got the actual. Yep. The actual itself.
Oh, that looks beautiful.
Yeah, man. So I hope you enjoy that.
Yeah. And I when the day it came out, I put my headphones on, got in the hot tub, and looped the album. And man, there's just some amazing stuff. I love the variety. I love the heart behind it, and the journey that. I mean, I was someone when I was ages 16 through 20 something. I was very much in the same places that you were in terms of confusion. I had chronic fatigue or a muscular, like a connective tissue disorder going on, and so many of your videos and lyrics have reinforced the victory that I have felt over the past few years. So just, I mean, if I could be an encouragement to you back, like, I mean, you're doing it right, man. You're getting treatment. You're making good health choices and taking care of yourself, both physically and your mind. And it's just so wonderful to watch.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
So, all right. I think that's a good official ending right there.
Yes, brother. Thank you so much for having me on, man. And I really want to say thank you to you, man, because honestly, I've watched a lot of your videos before you even reacted to me. And you were one of my favorite singing coaches on YouTube. So thank you. I really think it's beautiful the way. What I really liked about your approach was you do. A lot of it is kind of like, okay, there's technique, yes, and that's important, but it's so much about the expression and it's so much about the freedom. And I really like that approach. Which is why I watched a lot of your videos. It really clicked with me. how you were trying to teach. And yeah, I just want to say thank you as well, because you are responsible for part of my growth as an artist as well.
Ooh, that's awesome. That's amazing.